In an age ruled by zealots and dreamers, one man's wisdom kept the realm from falling apart. Viserys Targaryen, younger brother to Aegon III, had spent his life in service rather than glory. While others burned with passion, he governed with reason, a scholar among swordsmen, a man of ink and patience. For more than 20 years, he had guided kings from behind the throne, first his grieving brother, then his reckless nephew, and finally his saintly ward. By the time the crown passed to him, he had already been the true power of Westeros for half a lifetime. He was no warrior, no dragon lord, and no conqueror. He was a builder of laws, systems, and quiet strength. The Maesters later called him the Scholar King, but those who had known him simply called him the Wise. Under his hand, Westeros found stability after decades of chaos. Yet in his meticulous order lay the seeds of the storm to come, for Viserys' reign would prepare the stage for one of the most corrupt monarchs in Targaryen history. Long before he ruled, Viserys had endured captivity. During the closing years of the Dance of the Dragons, he had been taken prisoner by the Triarchy and sold to Lys. For years he lived as a hostage, used by merchant princes to barter for peace with Westeros. In that foreign city of silk and smoke, he learned the ways of commerce, diplomacy, and deceit. It was said he mastered the tongues of Lys, Pentos, and Myr, and could charm gold from even the hardest men of trade. When peace finally came, the Lyseni released him, a gesture of goodwill that owed more to profit than mercy. He returned to Westeros thinner, wiser, and changed. Gone was the young prince who had dreamed of dragons. In his place stood a man who understood that power lay not only in armies, but in the flow of gold, law, and knowledge. He came home to a broken court and a realm still bleeding from war, and he quietly set about repairing it. During the reign of Aegon III, he served first as Master of Coin, then as Hand of the King. When the boy king grew into a man, Viserys became his most trusted advisor. Even when Aegon ruled in silence, it was Viserys who spoke for him. Later, under Daeron I, he managed the kingdom while the young dragon waged his ill-fated war in Dorne. And during the pious reign of Baelor I, it was Viserys who governed the realm while the king fasted and prayed. When Baelor imprisoned him for supposed sins of pride, Viserys endured it without bitterness. He had served mad kings and child kings alike, and he had learned that time was the greatest ally of the patient. When Baelor the Blessed finally starved himself to death, the realm turned to the man it had relied on all along. The lords and septons gathered in council and declared that Viserys, the Hand of Three Kings, should at last wear the crown himself. Viserys II began his reign not with grand ceremony or prophecy, but with quiet work. He dismissed the sycophants and zealots who had thrived under Baelor's sanctity and filled the court with learned men, merchants, and reformers. He reopened the brothels Baelor had closed, restored the theatres and taverns, and replenished the royal treasury that faith had drained. "A realm cannot pray its debts away," he told the High Septon, "nor feed its children with virtue." Under his rule, the chaos of the past decades gave way to stability. The king was methodical, almost cold in his administration. He ordered new ledgers of land and population, the first census since the conquest, and established tariffs that filled the crown's coffers without burdening the small folk. Trade with the free cities flourished once more. The ships of Old Town and Driftmark returned to the seas, carrying not soldiers, but merchants. To the common people, Viserys seemed distant but fair, a king who neither inspired love nor fear, but quiet respect. To the lords, he was a mirror of their own ambitions. He rewarded competence, punished waste, and ruled through reason rather than decree. The faith grumbled that he favored maesters over septons, but the realm prospered, and even the High Septon found little ground for protest. In time, the people began to speak of him as the Scholar King, a ruler who governed from his desk rather than the battlefield. Yet those who underestimated him learned their mistake swiftly. Viserys had not survived the dance nor the madness of his kin by gentleness alone. His mind was sharp as Valyrian steel, and though he seldom raised his voice, his word carried the weight of command. Viserys believed that true strength lay in systems that outlived kings. He founded the royal mint, standardizing the coinage that had long varied across regions. He reformed the small council, separating its offices by clear duty and rank, and established written codes for governance in every royal department. To ensure oversight, he created the office of the King's Justice, ensuring that even lords could be held accountable under royal law. He also restructured the City Watch, giving it chainmail, salaries, and authority beyond the whims of local captains. He strengthened the navy through Lord Alan Valerian, ensuring that piracy in the narrow sea was crushed and Westerosi merchants could travel safely once again. It was said that every decree Viserys made was written twice, once for the archives and once for history. But perhaps his greatest legacy was the founding of the Royal Archives, where copies of every treaty, edict and census were stored beneath the Red Keep. "A king's memory must not die with him," he told the Grand Maester. "A kingdom that forgets its past is a kingdom doomed to repeat it." These reforms, dry as they seemed, would outlast his line. In the centuries that followed, every king of Westeros, wise or foolish, ruled through systems Viserys had created. Even as he strengthened the realm, Viserys never lost sight of its perils. The memory of the dance and the ruin it had brought haunted him. To prevent such bloodshed from returning, he sought balance between faith and crown, noble and common, peace and readiness. He arranged marriages to secure alliances, most notably between his son Aegon and Nerys Targaryen, Baelor's beautiful and devout sister. It was a union of politics, not affection, and one that would haunt both their lives, for from it would come the next king, Aegon IV, the Unworthy. Viserys was not blind to his son's vices. Even as a youth, Aegon showed cruelty and arrogance, delighting in excess and mockery. "He has the appetites of Maegor," Viserys is said to have sighed, "but none of his purpose." Yet despite his misgivings, the Scholar King continued to groom him for the throne. He believed education could temper nature, that wisdom could tame even the fire of Targaryen blood. He was wrong. Still, during his reign, peace endured. The roads were safe, the coffers full, and the realm prospered as it had not since the days of Viserys, the conciliator. For a brief and shining moment, Westeros knew order, the calm before the storm. After 2 decades of ruling from the shadows, Viserys II Targaryen reigned for little more than a year before death claimed him in his sleep. He left behind no wars, no revolts, and no unfinished debts, only a kingdom restored to health. To the small folk, his passing brought sadness, to the lords, unease. For though the Scholar King had given them order, the heir he left behind promised only chaos. The Maesters would remember him as a man of intellect, the most capable administrator ever to sit the Iron Throne. The Septons would praise his restraint and learning, even as they condemned his lack of faith. But history remembers him for something greater still, for proving that wisdom alone can hold a kingdom together, if only for a time. His death marked the end of an age of peace and the beginning of an age of decadence. For as the flames of wisdom faded, the fire of corruption rose, and from that fire would emerge Aegon IV, known to all as the Unworthy. In the next episode, the Age of Reason gives way to rot. Aegon the Unworthy ascends the Iron Throne, a king of lust, greed, and betrayal, whose countless bastards will divide the Targaryen line and plunge Westeros into chaos. From courtly decadence to the birth of the Blackfire Rebellion, witness how one man's corruption sowed a century of blood. The scholar's peace is dead. Now begins the reign of sin. He was born into peace, and he destroyed it. Aegon Targaryen, fourth of his name, was the son of Viserys II, the Scholar King, whose quiet reforms had restored the realm after decades of chaos. Where his father valued wisdom and restraint, Aegon embodied indulgence. From childhood, he hungered for attention, luxury, and pleasure. Tutors found him clever, but undisciplined. Septons despaired at his mockery of prayer. Even as a boy, Aegon delighted in excess, eating until he was ill, drinking wine at 13, and surrounding himself with flatterers and fools. His father hoped to refine him through study, but Aegon treated books as burdens. Where Viserys had built systems of order, Aegon saw cages. "A king," he once said, "should not count coppers, he should count hearts." But the hearts he sought were never those of his subjects. They were those of women, courtiers, and sycophants. At 16, he was wed to his sister Nerys Targaryen, a union arranged to preserve the purity of the royal line. Nerys was everything he was not, gentle, devout, and fragile. She loved peace, song, and prayer. Aegon loved everything else. It was said she wept on their wedding night, and that he laughed at her tears. When Viserys II died, the lords of Westeros hoped his son would continue his work of reason. What they received instead was decadence given form. Aegon IV was crowned in the Great Hall of the Red Keep, where he feasted for 9 days and nights. Each night the tables groaned beneath the weight of roasted boar, swan, and wine imported from Lys and Volantis. He gave gifts of jewels and gold to his mistresses, knighted his favorites, and filled the small council with flatterers. The learned men who had served his father were dismissed or ignored. Under Aegon's rule, the court became a carnival of excess. Feasts, tourneys, and masquerades consumed the treasury. The king's mistresses, noble and low-born alike, were given titles, lands, and power. The most notorious of them all was Lady Barbara Bracken, whose influence over the king provoked endless scandal. She was later replaced by Melissa Blackwood, her rival from the Riverlands. The Bracken-Blackwood feud, centuries old, now burned brighter than ever within the royal bedchamber itself. The king's indulgence spread like disease. Bribes bought offices, gold purchased pardons, and justice itself went to the highest bidder. The court's moral decay infected the realm. Lords began taxing their small folk to fund their own extravagance, following their king's example. The small folk called him Aegon the Unworthy, not to his face, but in every tavern from dawn to the wall. Aegon's reign became a study in self-destruction. The once orderly court of Viserys turned into a theatre of cruelty and indulgence. Aegon's appetites were endless. He grew fat and sickly, his face swollen, his breath foul. Yet he boasted of his virility and demanded to be called the Handsome. He took hundreds of lovers, both noblewomen and commoners, fathering bastards across the realm. He lavished gifts upon them while neglecting his lawful wife and his duties as king. He delighted in humiliating his courtiers, ordering duels for his amusement, mocking the pious and rewarding betrayal. He sold knighthoods and lordships to the undeserving, elevating fools and sycophants while banishing the wise. Those who criticized him disappeared or were found dead under suspicious circumstances. The crown's gold was spent not on the realm, but on pleasure barges that drifted down the Blackwater, where the king and his companions indulged every vice imaginable. And yet, amid the ruin, there remained one glimmer of nobility, his brother, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight. Sir Aemon was the very image of a chivalric ideal, brave, loyal, and pure of heart. To the realm, he was a hero. To Aegon, he was a reminder of everything he could never be. The tragedy of Aegon's reign was not only his corruption, but the cruelty it brought to those closest to him. His queen, Nerys, bore his insults in silence. She gave him 2 children, a frail daughter, Daenerys, and a son, Daeron, a boy the king refused to believe was his own. In Aegon's eyes, Daeron's gentleness and intellect were proof of bastardy. He accused Nerys of adultery with her brother, Sir Aemon the Dragon Knight, whose devotion to her had always been pure. The accusation nearly destroyed the royal family. Aemon refused to defend himself until Aegon forced him to trial by combat. When his accuser fell before him, Aemon refused to kill him, declaring his loyalty to the crown. Nerys fainted at the sight, and Aegon sneered that her tears were the truest confession. The queen's health never recovered. She retreated into prayer, her only solace the son her husband despised. As years passed, Aegon's cruelty deepened. He delighted in taunting his family, flaunting his mistresses before the court, and mocking Aemon's vows of chastity. When Queen Nerys died, some said from grief, Aegon ordered no mourning, only another feast. The 7 kingdoms whispered that the gods themselves had turned their faces from him. Aegon fathered more bastards than any king before or since. From noble women, handmaidens, and even servants, his offspring spread across the realm. Among them were names that would one day reshape Westeros. Daemon Waters, born of Melissa Blackwood, who would become known as Daemon Blackfire. Aegor Rivers, called Bittersteel. Brynden Rivers, later known as Bloodraven, and Shiera Seastar, famed for her beauty and sorcery. Though many of these children were raised honorably, their existence sowed resentment among the great houses and within the royal line. When Aegon grew ill in his final years, bloated and bedridden, he performed one last act of vengeance upon his kingdom. On his deathbed, he legitimized all his bastards, declaring them lawful heirs. It was a decision born of spite, a final insult to his son Daeron II, whom he still refused to acknowledge. That act would fracture House Targaryen for generations. The legitimized bastards, proud and ambitious, would soon rise against their half-brother, tearing Westeros apart in the Blackfire rebellions. With one stroke of the quill, Aegon had doomed his line. When Aegon IV Targaryen died, the small folk scarcely wept. His body, swollen with disease, was said to have burst as it was laid in its coffin. A grotesque end for a grotesque reign. Yet even in death, his corruption endured. His bastards lived on, his lusts echoed in legend, and his choices shaped the century to come. To the maesters, he was a cautionary tale, proof that a king's vices could destroy a dynasty faster than any war. To the septons, he was divine punishment for pride. To the singers, he was tragedy incarnate, a man born to greatness who drowned in his own appetites. His father had built a kingdom of law and wisdom. Aegon left behind a legacy of ruin. And yet, from that ruin would rise new dragons, and the greatest civil war since the dance itself. In the next episode, witness the reign of Daeron II Targaryen, called the Good. A king of peace and diplomacy, he would seek to unite the realm his father shattered. But blood calls to blood, and his father's bastards, led by Daemon Blackfire, would soon rise in rebellion. From the ashes of corruption will come a war of brothers, sons, and shadows. The beginning of the end for the Targaryen dynasty.